Donald Trump's increasingly strained relationship with the Fox News network is likely to get a lot worse because he just concluded probably the most humiliating interview he's ever had on Fox with host Howard Kurtz, who repeatedly fact-checked Trump to his face and then afterwards to the audience. This is brutal. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, we've got several clips to talk about in this video. Again, I'm stunned that Donald Trump agreed to this, perhaps because he assumed it was Fox and therefore he'd probably get a softball interview. But he sat down with Media Buzz host Howard Kurtz, who is one of the few who will occasionally show signs of journalistic integrity. Well, I don't know what got in Kurtz's Wheaties this morning, what he ate with his cereal, but he was feeling himself, and he gave Donald Trump what was probably the most humiliating interview on Fox. We're going to play the clips and unpack them together.
Being down with us here at Trump Tower.
Thank you very much. It's been fun. Thank you, Howard.
After our interview, Donald Trump flew to Pennsylvania, Arnold Palmer's hotel, where he discussed the golfer's signs of his manhood, dismissed Kamala Harris with a curse word, and asked the old Reagan question, are you better off now than you were 4 years ago? The vice president was in Atlanta, where she made the case for abortion rights, said Trump lacked compassion, and was joined by the family of a Georgia woman who died because she didn't receive proper medical care due to abortion restrictions. After the break, Brett.
So that was the conclusion. Again, the reason I'm playing that one first, I want you to think about it. So right after he shakes hands with Donald Trump, then he goes to basically humiliate Trump. Yeah, Trump left this to go to a rally where he talked a lot about Arnold Palmer's genitalia, which is something that we discussed in a previous video, and proceeded to humiliate him. Well, he also did it face to face too, with a bunch of fact checks and corrections. So now we'll play some of the clips from the interview and unpack them together.
Those things.
Your famous line about Springfield, Ohio, and I take your point that 15 to 20,000 legal Haitian immigrants settling in that area causes a lot of friction. But when you said, and you know it's gone viral there, they're eating the dogs, they're eating the cats, you say you're just reporting what had been said. But why not say now, well, look, that turned out not to be true.
I don't know if it's not true. I don't know if it's true or not true. I read
eating
something.
The pets, you don't know if it's true or not true? No. It's been debunked by local officials.
What about the geese? What about the geese? What happened there? They were all missing. I don't know.
There was one guy with two geese.
Howie, I have no idea. I said something. Those things.
Again, he's just unable to articulate. I just said things. Well, as President Obama recently said at a rally, and we'll probably do a video about this because it was one of Obama's best rallies, what presidents and former presidents say matter. It matters just by definition. I'm sorry, there is no idle threat, idle words. That's why presidents of both parties and former presidents of both parties have to be very careful about the things they say. But Donald Trump didn't just accidentally say something stupid. He said something deliberately, maliciously, and then doubled down on it. And so did his running mate, J.D. Vance. Donald Trump's lies, and they were lies about Haitian migrants in Ohio, have been repeatedly debunked even by Republicans who are politically aligned with Trump. It is a categorical lie. There is no truth to it. And Donald Trump should have corrected the record when that was brought to his attention. But quite frankly, he should have never said it in the first place without, independent corroboration. So again, this is just an example of how manifestly unfit he is for office. But he continues to demonstrate that in this interview.
Ever had.
To clarify, police did not usher protesters into the Capitol. They were totally overrun, though in some cases they may have beaten a tactical retreat. Donald Trump continues to argue, as you know, that the last election was rigged, though that's never been proven in any of the lawsuits filed. Up next.
So that was Howard Kurtz again afterwards, fact-checking to Fox viewers, and Fox had to pay $787 million. And by the way, Howard Kurtz was perhaps the only Fox host I know at the time who actually acknowledged the Dominion lawsuit and how bad it was for Fox that they co-signed Donald Trump's election lies, that they signal boosted the lies and defamed Dominion. So this is a through line for Kurtz. I'll give him credit there. But here he is fact-checking Trump about this idea that people were just led into the Capitol. There were some tactical retreats, but the initial breaches came from people busting through windows with police riot shields and, of course, grappling and fighting with police in the first place. And, of course, the 2020 election wasn't stolen. Donald Trump just got his ass kicked because he's a loser. So here's another clip from the interview.
The other day you called it a day of love. That sparked a lot of reaction, given that many police officers were attacked and there were mobs shouting, "Hang Mike Pence." Can you understand why many Americans would view it as a dark and tragic day in our history?
The crowd I spoke before, which you rarely see, I have pictures of it, massive, but nobody wants to put them in. It was the biggest crowd I've ever spoken to, and I've spoken to the biggest crowds. I've never seen that many people. A small group of them, and peacefully and patriotically, which nobody uses. My words were peacefully and patriotically. A small group went down to the Capitol, but they came because they thought it was a rigged election. This was a protest against a rigged election. And I can't say exactly the number, but I've had massive crowds, and this was by far the biggest crowd. I've spoken to the crowd at the Washington Monument and the Lincoln Memorial on the 4th of July. This crowd was bigger. And I tell you, there was a beauty to it and there was a love to it that I've never seen before.
But Mr. President,
a small group of people went down to the Capitol, and then a lot of strange things happened. And
a lot of strange things did happen, like a sitting president of the United States, Donald Trump, inciting an insurrection by lying, just blatantly lying to his cultish supporters, producing no evidence for his claims, urging them to march on the Capitol, and then watching the insurrection unfold on live TV for 3 hours and not doing a damn thing about it. When Donald Trump finally succumbed to pressure and went on Twitter and asked his followers to leave, they left. He has a cultish command of them. They would have left had he attempted to get them to leave 5 minutes into the insurrection. Set aside the fact that he should have never lied to his cultish supporters in this way in the first place. He should have never primed them for an insurrection. But after it went into effect, he could have snapped his fingers and called off the dogs. He didn't. He watched it unfold. It was a dereliction of duty for 3 hours, unlike any we have ever seen from a sitting president. And that's the important thing to remember. As a sitting president, Donald Trump had the highest level of constitutional power, but constitutional obligation as well, civic obligation to stop the insurrection, to crush the insurrection. And he didn't. Wasn't Nancy Pelosi's fault. Wasn't the DC mayor's fault. Donald Trump had the highest level of responsibility and the highest level of power. None came close, and he failed spectacularly. That alone disqualifies him to be president. But of course, his cultish supporters don't care. And instead, he is doubling down on the rhetoric that January 6th was a day of love, when it wasn't. Multiple people died in connection to January 6th. Police officers were battered and bruised and traumatized. And one of Trump's own supporters was killed when she attempted to breach the rotunda to kill congresspeople. He doesn't care.
General Jim Mattis, who was your Secretary of Defense, has now joined General Mark Milley, who was your Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, in saying, this is their quote, you are the most dangerous person ever. I assume you'd like to respond.
Well, they were not my cup of tea. They were woke. You know that. They were not great generals, in my opinion. I was asking them advice. I didn't agree with the advice. Look at the advice that Milley gave to Biden on Afghanistan. Move the soldiers out first. No, you have to move the soldiers out last. I don't respect them as soldiers. I never did. I fired them both.
General Jim Mattis.
So, and this is where Trump's cognitive decline kicks in. He didn't fire Mark Milley. He didn't. Mark Milley remained the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He said he fired them both, but he didn't. Mark Milley remained the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, even though Trump appointed him under the Biden administration. He was appointed by Trump, served under Trump, continued under President Biden, and then left his position, resigned last year. So Trump is number one, again, total state of cognitive decline about that. But number two, again, the hypocrisy, it does matter to us. They don't care. Republicans' shamelessness is their superpower. I think it actually delights them. I think they take joy in being so nakedly hypocritical and inconsistent because they know that it infuriates a lot of us on the left who expect at least some form of internal consistency. They don't care. And this is something that we're going to have to evaluate, I think, as part of our ongoing political enterprise. And certainly they should pay an electoral consequence for their hypocrisy moving forward, which is why it's good that Democrats are reclaiming notions of patriotism. The Democratic Party is the patriotic party. The Republican Party is not patriotic by definition. If you want to elevate Donald Trump above the Constitution, which they do, if you support Donald Trump, even though he's publicly said he wants to terminate the Constitution, if you want to support Donald Trump when he beatifies our foreign adversaries and puts down our war veterans, our combat veterans, our lifelong soldiers who have dedicated themselves to this country. You just don't love this country by definition, as far as I'm concerned. But of course, Donald Trump is like, well, what about the advice that, they gave President Biden over Afghanistan? I'll also remind you that Donald Trump was the one who set the stage for the Afghanistan withdrawal. He didn't have the courage to actually withdraw from Afghanistan, even though he had 4 years to do it and publicly promised that he would. Instead, he inked the terrible, objectively terrible Doha Agreement, cut the Afghan government out of the negotiations, dealt directly with the terrorist group known as the Taliban. Democrats did that. Republicans be furious. They don't care when Trump does it because he's perfect in their minds and he can do whatever he wants. Trump did that. Trump failed to enforce the terms of the deal. He gave the Taliban everything they wanted, everything, including Trump arranged for the release of 5,000 imprisoned Taliban fighters who went back to the Taliban and joined the invading force, which swept the country and conquered Afghanistan. Donald Trump did that. Donald Trump continued to retrograde, reduce U.S. troops and personnel and presence and manpower while effectively boosting the manpower of the Taliban. And he didn't make the Taliban agree to any of their terms other than to not shoot U.S. troops. That's it. It was a disastrous asymmetrical deal, which was asymmetrically enforced. And it set the stage for disaster. And it's a testament to the competence of the U.S. military that they were able, under those circumstances set forth by Trump, to still airlift more than 100,000, I think it was 120,000 people out of Afghanistan as the country was falling. That was on Donald Trump. But again, Trump doesn't care. Now, I mentioned Trump beatifying our foreign adversaries. Well, he does it here too. Once again, he doubles down on the rhetoric that our foreign adversaries are actually great people. And the real problem are Democrats.
The outside people, the so-called enemies, if they're enemies, and they might not be enemies, if you have a smart president, they can be handled. But when you have people investigating my campaign, when you have people, they spied on my campaign, how you understand that. That's been proven. But they spy on your campaign. The Russia hoax was all made up, and now it's acknowledged that it was made up. All of these different things. You have the 51 different agents saying it was from Russia, and now they all say it wasn't from Russia. Okay, so we were lying. Many other things, many. I could go. You just don't have enough time. But what they've done is so terrible. Who's ever heard of anything like this? Adam Shifty Schiff, he's a crooked guy. He's a crooked politician, 100%. And he's going to be a senator now. Can you believe it?
But again, he's a political opponent of yours.
He's not.
An enemy.
No, he's a. Well, he is. Of course, he's an enemy. He's an enemy.
So again, doubles down on it. He says, Putin are so-called enemies, and they might not be enemies, but Adam Schiff, a political opponent, he is an enemy. And he's just doubling down on this rhetoric where Trump says that, the real enemy is the enemy from within, Democrats, and he says that the military might need to be deployed against them.
You talk about the enemy within. There's enemies, America's enemies outside. The enemy within is a pretty ominous phrase if you're talking about other Americans.
I think it's accurate. I think it's accurate.
Who are you talking about?
And,
the enemy?
I heard that. They say, the enemy.
He thinks it's accurate. He's doubling down. Again, we've not heard this rhetoric. MAGA flipped out when President Biden gave the speech at Independence Hall, where there was the red and blue lights. They call it the dictator speech. And he gave so many caveats. He said, I'm not referring to all Republicans, not even most Republicans. He says, I think most Republicans are good and decent people. And he went on and on waxing poetic about how amazing Republicans were. And then he called out MAGA Republicans, a subset of MAGA Republicans. And bad faith actors on the right said, I can't believe the president of the United States is hating all Republicans, even though he explicitly, you don't even have to infer, because he said it specifically, that he wasn't referring to all Republicans or even most Republicans. Meanwhile, Donald Trump can say stuff like that, and they bend over backwards to make excuses for it. Really pathetic, hypocritical stuff. Again, Howard Kurtz gave Trump a pretty tough interview, fact-checking him to his face, asking him tough questions. And I imagine that as a consequence of this, Donald Trump's already increasingly publicly strained relationship with Fox is about to get a hell of a lot worse. In the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments.